This case was already the longest case in Georgia history because jury selection started, and I talked about this in Quick Bits this week as well, but jury selection started in January of 2023, coming up on 2 years ago when jury selection started. Jury selection ran until November 2023. 2 defendants remained in this trial that originally started with 7 defendants, and people pled out along the way. But when this 88-page RICO indictment came down, they charged a total of 26 defendants with more than 55 charges. All of the defendants had the RICO charges, and then other defendants had different charges. And so they had mixing and matching of the charges. But when Young Thug, who was kind of the lead named defendant, pled guilty, his lawyer was just like, do not do this. His lawyer's like, he wants to get out. I want him to ride it through to the end of trial. And I went through his plea deal and his extensive amount of time on probation. But he also took a bunch of felony charges, like a bunch of them, because he had to plead open to the court, or plead blind, as they call it in Georgia. He pled open to the court and is on like 40 years of probation. But he has room to like roll off of probation towards the end. But his lawyer was like, no, I want you to see this through. But that's not his lawyer's choice because his lawyer's not the one sitting in custody. And he pled what? A month ago, November 3rd, a month ago. He pled a month ago. And a bunch of other defendants pled out, and the jury came back with a verdict this morning. So we're going to go see what the verdict is for the remaining 2 defendants. Yak Gotti and Shannon Stillwell are the last 2 defendants. There have been so many defendants in this case, and so much has happened, including changing judges, including people getting arrested in court, people getting injured in custody, defense attorneys getting arrested, people being held in contempt, the Supreme Court of Georgia being like, what are you even doing? We're not holding this lawyer in contempt. This is dumb. All of it. It was such a wild case. So we're going to watch the verdicts come in on the last 2 defendants, and we're going to talk about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that you all have reached a verdict. Mr. Foreperson, is that correct? All right. And was it unanimous? All right.
Oh,
and
look.
This verdict has been filled in.
She asked the jurors, is it unanimous? Oh, how helpful.
And signed and dated by you, correct? Or for each defendant. All right. And I noticed that Mr. Kendrick's verdict form is dated December 2nd. Is that because that's when you all reached the verdict with regard to him? Okay. And then Mr. Stillwell's is dated today. Okay.
Oh.
All right.
So they had a verdict on the other defendant for quite a while, and it sounds like we're deliberating over Stillwell for the balance of the time.
Kendrick, you have been found not guilty on all charges. Mr. Stillwell.
Not guilty on all charges.
Stand. You have been found guilty on count 64, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and not guilty on every other charge.
1 guilty for possessing a firearm. Not guilty on everything else.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are officially released from further service, and I cannot express the degree of thanks that Fulton County owes you for your service. Given the length of this trial, you have paid close attention this entire time.
His defense attorney immediately looks like he's going to cry. Immediately, he's like you can see him trying to will the tears back up into his face. Because these are the 2 defendants. When everyone else took pleas, these are the 2 defendants that were like, no, we're staying in this thing no matter what happens. And they won.
Are we going to go ahead with sentencing? Is the state, I know the state had filed a recidivist notice.
Yes.
Do y'all intend to stand on that?
Yes.
All right. So the recidivist is A and C recidivist. That means that I have no discretion but to sentence to the maximum on that count. And the sentence possibility is 5 to 10. I must sentence to 10 years. However, I can probate any part of that sentence at my discretion.
So what the judge said is because of the recidivist statute, because he was convicted of felon in possession of a firearm, which means he has previously been convicted of a felony and then was convicted of the next felony. I don't know what the standards are for Georgia's, if it's just one or if the recidivism needs multiple charges. Every state does that differently, whether you need one conviction or if you need a bunch of convictions. But the state filed that, and so it forces this to be maxed out, which is 10 years. But she said, I can probate that, which means a term of probation.
And so the court sentence on count 64 for Mr. Stillwell is going to be 10 years to serve 2, with credit for time served, the balance served on probation.
So he's
right,
out of custody. He's out of custody. The judge sentenced him to 10 years time served, which means the amount of time he's been in, and then probation, which for a felon in possession of a firearm, 2 years seems about right. In court, in the YSL case, the morning of December 3rd, the jury, who had been on jury duty for almost 2 years at this point, came back entirely with not guilty verdicts for defendant Deamonte Kendrick, aka Yak Gotti, and came back with just one conviction for Shannon Stillwell on a felon in possession of a firearm, an incident that stemmed from the day that he was arrested. The judge then sentenced him to the maximum under the law, which was also statutorily required. And the court made a very thorough record that this sentence was required by law. He was sentenced to 10 years, 2 years time served. Actually, it ended up being a little bit more than 2 years time served, and the rest of it to be served on probation. However, he does still have a case that he picked up while he was in custody that has to be resolved before he will be released from custody. But his attorney did say after court in a press conference that he believes that his client Stillwell will be home by Christmas. And that really is fairly realistic, saying we are just at the beginning of December, and anything that was picked up in custody will probably also get time served concurrent with probation. I imagine that they will do that tomorrow or within the next few days. With all of that, can the other defendants who took plea deals reopen their plea deals? No, their plea deals are done, and different evidence went to each of the defendants. Do I think that Young Thug's attorney, Brian Steele, is probably sitting there going, this is what I thought was going to happen. This is why I didn't want my client to plead? Probably. But also, there are still numerous defendants that have not gone to trial yet. In this 88-page, over 55-count indictment with 26 defendants, not all of the defendants went to trial in the first trial, though the judge did indicate at a setting conference that she wondered if the prosecution would maybe regroup a little bit and be offering plea deals to the defendants that have not gone to trial yet. And we will see if that happens after those not guilty verdicts. But they were resounding not guilty verdicts. The thing that's notable about the verdicts, though, is that the jury did take their time. They started deliberating before Thanksgiving. And when they came back, they didn't just acquit on everything. It seems that this jury went through the evidence and looked at the evidence and said, yes, there's evidence that Stillwell had a prior felony and had a gun. But on all the other stuff, I don't see this as being beyond a reasonable doubt. So it indicates to me that even though we know this jury's frustrated based on questions they had asked the court, we know this jury's been there for 2 years, they still took their time and were incredibly thoughtful instead of just throwing up 2 middle fingers going, you know what, not guilty for everybody, let's go. It shows that they still took their time to evaluate the evidence, which is the job that they were given to do. And when they evaluated all of the state's evidence, they came back with, yeah, that's not going to do it for us. Do the defendants who plead guilty now reevaluate their own decisions? Maybe, maybe not, because you can't change it. You can't go back in time. And that's where the case remains. What the prosecution team does from here will be very interesting. And I'll keep you updated with that in the Quick Bits on Mondays. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.